I've heard you say before that slavery is a foundational institution on which the United States has been built. What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I think it's inarguable. If you just look at not just the facts of history, but look at all of the tensions, kind of the defining tensions of American life, the ways that we are exceptional to the world. A lot of that goes back to the date 1619. So when we understand that the first British colonists settled Jamestown in 1607, and just 12 years later, we have begun African slavery here. That means there's almost nothing older than slavery, than African slavery in the original 13 colonies that would form the United States in 1776. At the time of the Revolution, 1/5 of the population in those 13 colonies are enslaved. All 13 colonies engaged in slavery. And then when we think about who were the kind of most important founders, who drafted our Declaration of Independence, who was the father of the Constitution, who was the father of the Bill of Rights, who was the first president, they were all Virginians who were enslavers. And we see an entire architecture of laws, of policies, of science and religion that is built up to justify slavery and to justify the fact that the wealthiest colonies in this country were the colonies that engaged in slavery.
It's beyond belief, the wealth that was there. And of course, it was all built on cotton and all built on slavery.
Right. And think about something like the Industrial Revolution. What do we think that textiles were being made of in these northern factories? It was enslaved grown cotton. When we learn about technological advancements, and I remember being taught, like we all are, about the cotton gin, but nobody connects the fact that the cotton gin is what makes slavery extremely profitable. Look at your Ivy League universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale. They were all funded to some degree by money that was being made by enslaved people. New York City becomes one of the most important financial sectors in the world because they are creating policies to insure the enslaved, slave mortgages, collateralizing slavery, and trading the commodities that are being picked by enslaved people, including cotton, sugar, and indigo and rice. So we've kind of tried to section slavery off as if it was just in the realm of the backward South. But this was an American endeavor, and our nascent capitalism was really built on the institution of slavery. So what we're arguing is it's just central to the American story. We did not need slavery to be successful, but we chose slavery, and that led to our success in many ways.
Is it fair to say that the most important commodity for the United States as we developed was actually human beings?
Yeah, without a doubt. So we know that in terms of the financials of, or the financial cost of the assets, that enslaved people, their value was worth more than all of the factories and the railroads in America combined. That the single largest kind of wealth commodity was human beings. Think how differently we would think about American capitalism, which we tied to freedom, if we understood that so much of American capitalism was actually tied to bondage.
You mentioned once that every kid in the US knows the story of the Mayflower, but nobody knows the story of the White Lion. And I bet that a majority of the people watching us on this show right now don't know that story, don't know what that ship is. And I'd like you to tell us.
Yes, so the 1619 project is named after the year 1619, which is when the first Africans were sold into the colony of Virginia and sold into slavery. So your more astute viewers will know that the Mayflower Compact is 1620. And so this other ship called the White Lion that carried this cargo of human beings that were traded for food and other necessities, that came a year earlier, but had been kind of completely erased from our national mythology, our national narrative, and even the history we get in history books. But I would argue, as we do, that that ship was actually more important to the country that would be built in some ways than the Mayflower. So when you think about, I have an 11-year-old child, she certainly has learned about the Pilgrims. Many American children are asked to dress up like the Pilgrims and the natives. But by the time that happened, there were actually 3 racial groups on the continents, and one of them gets erased, and the other one's story gets erased, which are indigenous people.